Divine guidance is often spoken about as if it were a destination one reaches through effort alone. We list our prayers, our restraint from the haram, our moments of devotion, and quietly assume that guidance is the natural outcome of these actions. Yet this way of thinking subtly shifts the heart from servitude to entitlement. Hidayah is not a wage paid for good behavior. It is a gift placed gently by Allah into a heart He chooses to keep alive. A believer may wake before dawn to pray, guard their tongue, lower their gaze, and carry love for Allah in their chest. These are noble acts, but they are not proof of personal superiority. They are signs of mercy already at work. If guidance were purely the result of effort, then no one who strives would ever fall. And yet history and lived experience tell a different story. Hearts that once trembled with faith can harden. Tongues that once remembered Allah can grow silent. This fragility is not meant to produce despair, but awareness. The Quran reminds us of this reality in a way that humbles the soul. If Allah had willed, He could have guided all of humanity. Surah Ar-Ra'd 13:31. The verse does not negate human choice, but it places that choice within a greater truth. We choose, strive, and act, but all of it unfolds within the will of Allah. Guidance exists where effort meets divine permission. Without that permission, even the most disciplined heart would wander. This realization changes the posture of worship. Prayer is no longer performed with quiet confidence in oneself, but with reverence and dependence. Obedience is no longer a badge of honor, but a responsibility guarded with fear. When a believer understands that faith itself is a mercy, gratitude deepens. Every act of worship becomes an act of thanks. Ya Allah, you allowed me to stand before you today. There is also a gentle fear that accompanies this awareness. Not a paralyzing fear, but a protective one. The fear of losing guidance does not make the believer anxious. It makes them careful. It softens arrogance and replaces it with humility. One stops looking down on others and begins praying for them instead, knowing that the only difference between a guided heart and a lost one is Allah's continued care. True servitude begins here. Not when a person feels spiritually accomplished, but when they recognize how easily they could be without faith at all. When they admit that had Allah withdrawn His light for even a moment, the heart would stumble into confusion. In this space, worship becomes sincere, repentance becomes frequent, and reliance on Allah becomes constant. Guidance, then, is not something we possess. It is something we are entrusted with, renewed daily by Allah's mercy, sustained by His will, and preserved only as long as He allows. There is a state more subtle than disbelief and more dangerous than open sin. It is not loud rebellion or visible rejection of Allah. It is ghaflah, heedlessness, a quiet drifting of the heart away from remembrance while the body continues its rituals. Ghaflah is not ignorance in the sense of never knowing. It is forgetting what one already knows. It is living as though Allah is distant, even while claiming belief in His nearness. A heedless person may still pray. They may stand in Jumu'ah, recite familiar verses, and move their lips with dhikr. Outwardly, nothing seems broken, yet inwardly, their decisions are no longer anchored in tawhid. Desire becomes the compass. Convenience becomes the judge. Allah is remembered in moments of worship, but absent from moments of choice. Life is navigated as if divine accountability were theoretical rather than imminent. This is what makes heedlessness so perilous. Sin at least disturbs the heart. It causes guilt, restlessness, and often repentance. Ghaflah, on the other hand, numbs. The heart grows accustomed to Allah's absence from daily consciousness. Over time, remembrance feels heavy and reflection feels unnecessary. One no longer asks, "Is Allah pleased with this?" but rather, "Does this serve me?" The shift is subtle, but the consequences are profound. Allah describes this condition with piercing clarity in the Quran. They have hearts with which they do not understand, eyes with which they do not see, and ears with which they do not hear. They are like livestock, rather they are even more astray. Surah Al-Araf 7:179. The verse does not speak of physical blindness or deafness. These faculties work perfectly well in the material world. What has failed is spiritual perception, the ability to recognize truth, to be moved by reminders, to feel awe in the presence of Allah. These senses have gone dormant. Animals follow instinct without moral responsibility. Humans were given consciousness, reflection, and accountability. When a person lives heedlessly, they surrender the very gift that distinguishes them. They eat, work, desire, and pursue pleasure, but without higher awareness. In that state, even acts of worship risk becoming habits rather than encounters with the divine. Heedlessness also creates a dangerous illusion of safety. Because the person is not openly sinful, they feel secure. There is no urgency to change, no alarm sounding in the heart. Yet this false calm is exactly what allows the heart to drift further. Reminders bounce off without penetration. Verses are heard but not absorbed. Warnings are acknowledged intellectually but never allowed to transform behavior. To awaken from ghaflah is not merely to increase religious activity, but to restore consciousness of Allah's gaze in every space of life. It is to remember that nothing is hidden, that every choice is seen, and that the heart was created to remain awake. When remembrance returns, life regains clarity. Without it, even a seemingly religious life can quietly hollow out from within. Islam does not measure life only by breath and movement. It speaks of another kind of life, one that resides deeper, unseen, yet decisive. The life of the heart. Every human being carries a heart within them, but not every heart is truly alive. Some pulse with awareness, some struggle between light and shadow, and some have fallen into a silence so deep that even revelation no longer stirs them. A living heart is not defined by perfection, but by responsiveness. When it hears the Quran, something within it moves. Sometimes it trembles with fear, other times it settles into serenity, but it always reacts. The words of Allah do not pass through it like sound through empty air. They land, echo, and leave a trace. Such a heart recognizes truth instinctively, even when it challenges comfort. It feels the weight of accountability and the sweetness of closeness to Allah. Allah describes this state with tenderness. The believers are only those who, when Allah is mentioned, their hearts tremble, and when His verses are recited to them, it increases them in faith. Surah Al-Anfal 8:2. This trembling is not weakness, it is life. It is proof that the heart is awake, sensitive, and connected to its Lord. Between life and death lies another state, the sick heart. This heart is unstable, pulled in opposing directions. At times it inclines toward righteousness, repentance, and humility. At other moments it leans toward desire, arrogance, and neglect. It recognizes truth but struggles to commit to it fully. The illness is not the presence of sin alone, but inconsistency without urgency to heal. Left untreated, sickness does not remain neutral. It either recovers or deteriorates. The most tragic state is that of the dead heart. This is not sudden. Hearts rarely die overnight. They fade. Reminder after reminder is ignored. Accountability is postponed. Sins are justified. Faculties meant to guide, eyes, ears, intellect, are misused until they no longer serve their higher purpose. Eventually, the heart stops responding altogether. The Quran is heard, but nothing stirs. Warnings are given, but they feel irrelevant. Even death is mentioned, yet it feels distant, abstract, unreal. Islam places the heart at the center of understanding because true comprehension is not merely intellectual. Guidance does not enter through logic alone. It penetrates through humility. When the heart dies, guidance no longer finds an entrance. Not because the message is unclear, but because the receiver has shut down. This is why the Prophet emphasized the heart as the core of the human being. When it is sound, the entire life aligns. When it is corrupted, no outward structure can compensate. Reviving the heart begins with honesty, recognizing its state, and with returning to remembrance before silence becomes permanent. The Quran is recited across the world, echoing in masajid, homes, cars, and gatherings. Its verses are memorized, beautified, and repeated daily. Yet not every ear that hears it is changed by it. The difference is not in the clarity of the words, but in the quality of listening. The Quran was never meant to be background sound. It was revealed as a conversation with the heart. For the Quran to truly function as a reminder, three conditions must come together. The first is a living heart, a heart that still feels, still reflects, still pauses when truth is spoken. Without this, even the most powerful verses pass by like wind over stone. The second condition is attentive listening, not just physical presence, but presence of mind. To listen as if the words are meant personally, not generally, as if Allah is speaking now, not only to people long ago. The third condition is inner witnessing against oneself. This is the most demanding form of listening. It means allowing the Quran to question you before you question others. To resist the instinct to think, this verse applies to someone else. Instead, the believer asks, where am I in this verse? What does this reveal about my heart? Allah alludes to this depth of engagement when he says, indeed in that is a reminder for whoever has a heart or listens while being present. Surah Kaf 50:37. The verse does not say merely who hears, but who listens while being present. Presence transforms sound into guidance. True listening creates an internal dialogue. A verse about hypocrisy prompts self-examination. A verse about accountability awakens fear. A verse about mercy stirs hope. The Quran becomes a mirror, not a performance. The believer does not rush past difficult verses. They sit with them. Discomfort is not avoided. It is embraced as a sign that the heart is still responsive. The heedless, by contrast, may sit through the same recitation and leave unchanged. The words were heard, but they never crossed into reflection. There is no inward pause, no moment of reckoning. Life resumes exactly as it was before. This is not because the Quran failed, but because the listener refused to engage. Listening sincerely also establishes a habit of self-accountability. The soul learns to interrogate itself regularly, rather than waiting for the interrogation of the hereafter. Each encounter with the Quran becomes a checkpoint. Am I aligned with this truth or resisting it? Over time, this practice refines intention and sharpens awareness. The Quran does not demand perfection from its listener. It asks for honesty. When a person listens with sincerity, even their shortcomings become pathways to growth. But when listening is reduced to routine, the greatest reminder risks becoming the most neglected. The transformation lies not in how often the Quran is heard, but in how deeply it is allowed to speak. There is a discipline in Islam that is both unsettling and protective. The courage to stand before oneself without excuses. True believers do not live with a quiet assumption of safety. They live with awareness, not despair, but vigilance, not paranoia, but honesty. They understand that the most dangerous enemy is not the sin they recognize, but the hypocrisy they fail to see within themselves. Self-accountability is not an act of self-hatred. It is an act of sincerity. The believer does not read verses about punishment with a sense of distance, imagining other faces, other lives, other failures. They read them as if the verse were asking a personal question. Where do you stand? This inward turning is what shields the heart from arrogance. It dismantles the illusion that outward religiosity alone guarantees divine pleasure. Allah commands this inner vigilance with striking clarity. O you who believe, fear Allah, and let every soul look to what it has sent forth for tomorrow. Surah Al-Hashr 59:18. The verse does not say, look at what others have done. It directs the gaze inward, toward one's own record, one's own intentions, one's own compromises. Tomorrow is not vague, it is coming. And preparation begins now, in the quiet spaces of the heart. The Quran was never revealed to preserve comfort. It was revealed to interrupt it. Its warnings are meant to shake the soul awake, not lull it into complacency. When verses about hell are recited, the believer does not rush to reassurance. They pause. They feel the weight. They ask themselves whether their actions align with their claims. This discomfort is not a flaw in faith, it is a sign of life. One of Shaitan's most subtle deceptions is to convince a person that they are already righteous enough, that their prayers, their knowledge, or their identity as a believer places them beyond serious scrutiny. This illusion is dangerous because it silences repentance. When a person assumes acceptance, they stop correcting themselves. The ego relaxes and the heart hardens under the guise of confidence. Self-accountability keeps the soul unsettled in the best way. It prevents spiritual stagnation. It turns the Quran into a living standard rather than a ceremonial recitation. Each warning becomes a checkpoint. Each command becomes a mirror. The believer learns to suspect their own sincerity before suspecting others' failures. This mindset also protects against hypocrisy. Hypocrisy thrives where self-examination is absent. When a person is more concerned with how they appear than who they are before Allah, faith becomes a performance. But when the heart regularly interrogates itself, why am I doing this? Who am I trying to please? Intentions are purified, even when actions are imperfect. Islam does not ask the believer to live in fear of Allah's mercy, but in awareness of His justice. The balance is delicate and essential. Hope without accountability breeds arrogance. Fear without hope breeds despair. Self-accountability keeps both in harmony. Before a day arrives when no excuses will be accepted and no intentions can be revised, the believer chooses to question themselves now. This choice is not a burden, it is a mercy, because the soul that judges itself today is far less likely to be humiliated tomorrow. The senses are among the greatest gifts a human being possesses. Allah has given us sight, hearing, and speech not merely as tools for survival, but as instruments for recognition, reflection, and worship. Each glance, each word, each sound is a potential conduit to truth or a gateway to distraction. The choice lies not in the faculties themselves, but in how they are directed. Misuse turns gifts into instruments of neglect, and the heart, not the body, bears the cost. Sight that roves over forbidden beauty, hearing that lingers on vain talk, speech that praises self or mocks others. These are not harmless habits. They gradually erode the spiritual lens through which reality is perceived. The Quran describes such neglect with piercing precision. Have you seen the one who takes his desire as his God? Then would you be responsible for him? Surah Al-Furqan 25:43. The verse reminds us that when desires dominate, they blind the heart. The eyes may see, the ears may hear, and the tongue may speak, yet the soul drifts unaware, deaf to guidance, blind to truth. The danger is subtle. Human beings are easily lulled by the glitter of worldly pleasures. The fleeting joys of status, entertainment, and indulgence can captivate attention so completely that remembrance of Allah slips away like sand through fingers. Life becomes a series of distractions, each more urgent than the last, while the eternal is postponed indefinitely. We forget that the faculties entrusted to us were meant to transform existence into worship. True success is not measured by accumulation, applause, or sensory pleasure. It is measured by the alignment of one's faculties with divine purpose. To see with awareness is to notice the signs of Allah in creation and recognize His mercy in daily life. To hear with mindfulness is to absorb the Quran, wisdom, and sincere counsel. To speak with conscience is to spread truth, remembrance, and humility. When the senses are reoriented toward these goals, ordinary life becomes extraordinary, a continuous act of worship grounded in tawhid. This transformation is not sudden, nor is it complete in one effort. It requires intentionality, repetition, and reflection. Each glance, each word, each note absorbed or uttered can either deepen blindness or awaken insight. The believer who chooses the path of consciousness gradually cultivates a heart that perceives beyond the ephemeral, a soul that distinguishes between illusion and reality, a life that radiates obedience in every action. Misuse of the senses, by contrast, dulls awareness. The Quran likens such a person to one whose faculties function only superficially. The eyes see but do not perceive, the ears hear but do not understand, the tongue speaks but does not guide. Spiritual blindness is not punishment, it is consequence. Yet even this state is reversible. Turning the faculties toward remembrance, reflection, and obedience restores light to the heart. Each mindful glance, each attentive ear, each measured word becomes a step away from illusion and toward the divine reality that gives life its true vision. Youth is often mistaken for immunity, and life's earliest years are treated as a rehearsal rather than the main performance. In this way, many postpone their commitment to faith, assuming that devotion is a luxury to be taken up only in old age. Islam, however, was never intended to be practiced as a seasonal pursuit. It demands a heart awake in every stage, a consistency that turns life itself into a continuous act of worship, rather than a series of hurried rituals near the end. The Quran reminds us of the importance of early awareness and diligence. O you who have believed, fear Allah, and let every soul look to what it has put forth for tomorrow. Surah Al-Hashr 59:18. While often read as a call to prepare for the hereafter, it is also a nudge to begin preparation early, not to wait until the twilight of life. Tomorrow comes for every soul, but the strength of one's spiritual fortitude is built in the days when energy is abundant. Passions are lively and choices are still free from the weight of habit. A life spent in negligence cannot be fully repaired by late repentance alone. The heart, once hardened by repeated distraction and indulgence, may respond to mercy, yet it lacks the foundation that a consistent life of worship and reflection provides. True guidance is cultivated, nurtured, and strengthened over time, not sown hurriedly at the final hour. The Ummah thrives when hearts are awakened early, when youthful energy is invested in remembrance, obedience, and service, rather than squandered entirely and only recalled in later years. Legacy is more than ritual. It is measured in the formation of righteous children, in sincere and thoughtful effort, in the quiet accumulation of deeds woven into the fabric of daily life. A single act of devotion at the end of life cannot compensate for decades of absence, just as one tree planted in old soil cannot replace a flourishing forest. The believer's task is to live intentionally from the start, to pray when young, to act justly, to seek knowledge, to maintain humility, and to carry love for Allah in every moment. The danger lies not in the eventual awakening, but in the mindset that life can be divided into secular and sacred seasons. Every day provides opportunity. Every hour holds potential. Youth is fertile ground, capable of sustaining growth that will endure when the body grows frail. By postponing religion, one risks spiritual fragility, relying solely on mercy at a point when guidance must work harder to penetrate a heart numbed by years of neglect. To honor Islam fully is to integrate it seamlessly into life from its earliest stages. Rituals, ethics, and remembrance are not final acts. They are the ongoing pulse of existence. When a young heart awakens, the entire journey of life becomes purposeful. Actions compound, habits form, and mercy intertwines with effort. In this way, faith is not a hurried conclusion, but a continuous, living testament, shaping character, community, and legacy long before the final stage arrives. There is a subtle yet profound difference between forgetting and turning away. Human beings are fallible, and forgetfulness is part of our nature. We may neglect prayer in a moment of distraction, fail to pause in reflection, or overlook a lesson the Quran presents. Such lapses are forgiven when recognized and corrected, and they often serve as reminders of our dependence on Allah's mercy. Forgetfulness is a temporary dimming, a cloud that passes when the heart remembers and returns to awareness. Heedlessness, or ghaflah, is something else entirely. It is not an accident nor a fleeting lapse. It is a choice, a deliberate veiling of the heart from what it already knows to be true. Unlike forgetfulness, which can be remedied, heedlessness is a gradual closing off of spiritual perception. The Quran describes this condition with piercing clarity. And they will say, our hearts were under coverings from that to which you invite us, and in our ears deafness, and between us and you is a veil. So work, indeed, we are working. Surah Al-Mutaffifin 83:14-15. These veils are not imposed from outside. They are willingly placed by the heedless themselves, insulating the heart from reflection, warning, and mercy. Ghaflah gives a dangerous illusion, the feeling that everything is fine, that faith is safe, and that no urgent effort is required. Life continues in routine. Outward appearances may remain religious, and the person may even feel secure. Meanwhile, the heart slowly hardens. Sensitivity to reminders dulls. The Quran becomes mere words, prayer becomes habit, and ethical lapses are rationalized. Time passes, and the inner life quietly erodes, often without the individual noticing until a stark reminder shakes the illusion. The believer is called to resist this slow corrosion of the soul. Seeking protection from ghaflah is not a one-time effort. It is a daily necessity. Morning and evening, in public and private, the heart must be gently reminded. Am I awake to Allah's presence? Am I conscious of my intentions? Am I slipping into comfort at the expense of accountability? These questions restore vigilance and cultivate a heart that remains alive, responsive, and humble. There is mercy even here. Unlike the heart that has died completely, a heedless heart can awaken. Recognition of one's ghaflah is itself a turning toward life. The moment of awareness, when one admits that comfort has been mistaken for security, is a seed of renewal. The Quran is alive, guidance is near, and the heart, though veiled, can be pried open by sincere reflection, dhikr, and repentance. In this way, the distinction between forgetfulness and heedlessness becomes vital. Forgetfulness is excusable, a sign of human imperfection. Heedlessness is dangerous, a conscious drifting into darkness. Protecting the heart requires vigilance, self-examination, and humility. It requires acknowledging that security is never automatic, that every breath, every glance, and every act must be aligned with remembrance, lest the veils of ghaflah grow thicker and life itself loses its spiritual meaning. O Allah, source of light and life for every heart, awaken ours to your mercy and truth. Make our hearts alive with faith, trembling at your remembrance and serene in your guidance. Protect us from heedlessness, from the veils we place over our own souls, and from the silent corrosion of hypocrisy that steals life from within. Let the Quran be more than sound to our ears. Let it dwell in our chests, a lamp that illuminates our choices, a mirror that reflects our intentions, a companion that whispers accountability before the day we stand before you. Transform our eyes, ears, and tongues into instruments of remembrance, our desires into paths of obedience, and our days into a living devotion grounded in tawhid. O most merciful, grant us sincerity that purifies our worship, repentance that revives our hearts, and steadfastness that carries us through every trial. Keep us from drifting into comfort at the cost of vigilance, and guide us to seek you not only in the moments of devotion, but in every breath, every glance, every word. O Allah, let our youth and strength be a foundation for your remembrance, our years a continuous testament of obedience, and our actions a reflection of your mercy. Keep our hearts tender, our souls aware, and our lives bound to your light, so that when we return to you, the Quran may bear witness in our favor, and our hearts may meet you alive in faith, humble in love, and steadfast in devotion. Man, thank you for watching. If you found this video inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us reach more hearts and continue creating meaningful content. Stay connected and be part of our journey.